Why is the prohibition of torture absolute in IHL? Imagine a world where some rules are so important that they can never be broken, no matter what. In international humanitarian law, the prohibition of torture is one of those rules. It is a rule that applies at all times, during peace or war, and cannot be ignored or bent. This is because torture is seen as a direct attack on human dignity and the core values that protect everyone, even in the chaos of armed conflict. When we talk about conduct of hostilities and specific prohibitions, it's clear that torture goes against the very principles that make humanitarian law necessary. It is not just discouraged, it is outright forbidden, no exceptions. The reason for this absolute ban is rooted in the idea that every person deserves respect and humane treatment. Torture causes severe physical and mental pain intentionally, and that violates the inherent worth of every human being. International humanitarian law, especially through the Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols, demands that all persons who are not fighting or are no longer fighting be treated humanely. Torture directly contradicts this goal by inflicting unnecessary suffering. It's not just about causing pain, it's about violating fundamental human rights. Another key point is that the prohibition of torture is a jus cogens norm. That means it is a peremptory rule of international law from which no one can deviate. Even in extreme situations like war, states and armed groups cannot justify or excuse torture. This makes the rule absolute and unbreakable. The Geneva Conventions explicitly state that torture is a grave breach and a war crime. This means that anyone who commits torture can be prosecuted universally, no matter where or when it happens. Protecting civilians and those hors de combat, or out of the fight, is a core aim of international humanitarian law. Torture undermines this protection by causing unnecessary suffering and violating the rights of these vulnerable persons. It is also important to note that even during emergencies or threats to national security, the prohibition remains firm. There are no exceptions or derogations. The rule is designed to be universal and unwavering. States and armed forces are required to prevent torture, investigate allegations, and punish those responsible. This is part of their legal obligation to uphold the law and protect human rights. International criminal law, including the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, treats torture as a war crime and crime against humanity. This legal backing reinforces that torture is never acceptable. In practice, this means that military personnel and all parties involved in conflicts must always refrain from torture, regardless of the circumstances. Training on this prohibition is mandatory, and violations must be investigated and prosecuted. The absolute ban on torture is essential to uphold human dignity, maintain the integrity of humanitarian protections, and ensure accountability during conflicts. It reflects a universal commitment that torture can never be justified, no matter how difficult the situation.